Welcome to TrueU College Admissions, a conversation about transforming the college planning and application process so that it truly serves students' long-term success and well-being. My name is Angeline Mazel, and I'm a former Princeton University interviewer, TED Talk speaker, teacher, and founder of Anja Education Consultants. I'm also the very proud mom of a thriving 25-year-old now in grad school. At Anja Education, our mission is to guide students to college not as an end in itself, but as one step in designing a life of purpose, well-being, and prosperity. And our pro bono work helps to increase college access to underserved communities. We're thrilled to have as our guest today author, journalist, and lecturer Jeff Selingo. He has written about higher ed for more than 2 decades and is a New York Times bestselling author of 3 books. His latest book, Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions, was published in September 2020 and was named among the 100 notable books of the year by the New York Times. A regular contributor to The Atlantic, Jeff is a special advisor for innovation and a professor of practice at Arizona State University. He also writes a biweekly newsletter on all things higher ed called Next and co-hosts the podcast FutureU. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I have been reading your newsletter and attending your panels for several years, as well as sharing your books and the buyer-sellers list of colleges with the families we work with. Your contributions have been really crucial in helping our counselors, students, and parents understand how to reduce the cost of college and reframe the value of a college education within the changing employment landscape. When we talk with our families about prioritizing college fit over college rank, both the financial fit and the career planning pieces are integral to that. So thank you so much.
It's great to be here. I really appreciate it.
So let's start with you. Can you tell us what led you to your current focus of your work as a journalist, author, and lecturer?
So I've been interested in higher education for quite some time. I got my start at Ithaca College, where I was editor of the student newspaper, and wrote a lot of stories about the future of higher education and the future of colleges, and covered obviously the administration when I was in college. And then in my senior year, the second semester of my senior year, I actually worked for the local newspaper, the Ithaca Journal, which at the time was owned by Gannett. And I covered Cornell University. So I actually had the higher ed beat while still in college for the local newspaper. And those two experiences together really helped lead me to this idea that higher education is really the ladder to social mobility in this country. And I saw it in my own life, right? My mother didn't go to college. My father was a high school music teacher, first in his family to go to college. And so I saw how college changed his life and how college changed the lives of my family, and was just fascinated by this and covering this in college, and knew that eventually one day I would want to cover this in a wider world, which I eventually did as editor of the Chronicle of Higher Education.
Wonderful. So given your lifelong experience in this field, you've seen a lot of changes happen. Can you tell us how the changing nature of work is affecting career planning for students in high school and college? And what do you think are the key ways they can make more informed choices about majors and careers?
Well, I think that for the most part, when I was applying to college, I remember getting mail in the postal mail from colleges and universities at the time, and I would always go to the list of majors that they offered. And if they didn't offer journalism, because I wanted to be a journalist, I kind of threw the card out, or I threw the view book out, because I thought, well, you have to major in journalism to become a journalist. Little did I know at the age of 18 that most people actually major in something completely different than they were going to pursue a career in. And about 30% of freshmen change their majors after their first year in college. And so I think we have to separate out what students want to do in life from their college major. To me, college majors are a collection of courses, a curriculum, professors that make you excited about what you're learning. In many cases, it teaches you how to learn for the rest of your life. Now, obviously, there are some majors, engineering and business and accounting that prepare you for specific careers. But beyond probably a handful of majors, most majors are general enough that you could basically major in that because it offers you, great access to professors, interesting content, get your passions going, keeps you engaged in college, and then go on to go on to get a job in something completely different. And I think the problem is that we don't give students enough exposure to the job market in college. And so what I would encourage students to do is to get a sense of what people with your major have done. What have the students with your major the last 5 years, 10 years out of college, what have they done from your institution? Shadow some of those people if you can to get a sense of what these jobs are. Because I think when most students graduate from college and they start applying for jobs, they don't realize and they look at these job titles and it's like a foreign language to them.
So do you think this can start as early as high school in terms of exploring possible careers?
There's no doubt about that. It needs to start much earlier, and that most students are only exposed to certain careers based on where they live, based on what their parents do. They might see something within their own community, but that's a very small proportion of jobs and careers out there. So the more that we can do to expose students to the various jobs and careers that exist out there, the better off they're going to be about making those choices later on. And I think we also have to talk to them early on that just because you major in something in college doesn't necessarily mean it leads to that career. And in fact, most majors don't lead to specific careers. What you're trying to get in college is a mixture of skills, both foundational skills, so the ability to write and problem solve and think critically and work in teams, as well as very specific skills for the job market. That could be learning how to manipulate data in terms of data analytics. That could be social media training. It could be learning very specific job skills when it comes to AWS or Microsoft or some sort of certification like that. All of those things you could collect in college that will lead to a job. But again, it's not necessarily your major that will lead to that job.
Right. So it seems to me that the colleges that are offering things like co-ops and giving credit for time actually spent in the work world are really doing great service for these kids. Would you agree with that?
They are. I think that, again, where colleges help students get internships when they're in college, or other places that are well known for their co-ops, for example, like Northeastern University or Drexel or University of Cincinnati, where essentially students are, as part of their undergraduate curriculum, they get a job and they're able to use that job as part of the work. They make money, but they're also learning real skills while in college on the job market.
Fantastic. Can you tell us what you think the main challenges students and parents are facing today when they embark on the college planning and admissions process? And what do you think their biggest sources of stress are?
I think they don't really know what makes a good match in a college. I think they're frustrated by the fact that there are 4,000 colleges and universities out there. They hear maybe the names of the same colleges over and over again because of the rankings. But for the most part, they don't really know what makes a good match. So what are they looking for? They might know, okay, we don't want to go too far from home. We want a big school. We want a small school. We want a public school. We want a private school. They might not know how much they want to pay for college, but you usually don't know early on how much you as the individual family will have to pay, because they're discounting tuition for different families in different ways. It's like flying on an airplane. You have no idea what particular day and what seat it will cost you. And the same thing is in higher ed. And so it's really hard, I think, for families to make sense of the world of colleges and universities, of all these campuses out there. And that, to me, is their biggest source of frustration.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we see a lot of. And so some of the tools you've provided really have gone a long way to clarifying for families, how the process actually works. There's just so much misinformation. And lack of transparency, right?
There's a total lack of transparency in terms of, the colleges really control the process. They control what, how students get in. They control how much students get. And so I think that for the most part, it's a black box that most parents and students can't see inside of. And again, it's also a purchase that as a parent, you're probably only going to make once or twice or three times in your life, depending on how many kids you have. So it's not something that we're constantly studying. And so most people who come to this process, even if they went to college themselves, 20, 30 years ago, whatever it might be. And as a result, the process has changed dramatically since then.
Absolutely. So getting that information, that up-to-date kind of understanding of the system is crucial.
It's absolutely critical. And again, the more that they can read and give themselves time to really start this process. I'm not a fan of starting the college search process too early, but the more that parents could learn about the process when they're not in the midst of it, right? So the midst of it in their senior year, when their kids are seniors, but maybe just start investigating. Doesn't mean start the search, but start thinking about it and investigating it your sophomore year.
Fantastic. You mentioned in your last newsletter, ChatGPT and large language models. And I'm wondering, I know it's kind of early days, but I'm wondering how you think they might impact the college admissions process over the next few years.
It's fascinating. I've been playing with ChatGPT since it came out in late November, since this iteration of it came out in late November. And I was kind of fascinated by the fact that how well can it produce, for example, the college admissions essay. We know that that's a source of stress for students. We know that some students pay lots of money to have help with that essay. We know that in well-resourced high schools, they spend money and time with teachers in preparing those essays for students. So what if now a artificial intelligence could write that essay for them? And so I experimented a lot with it. And as I put in my newsletter, I put a sample of an essay in there. It's hard, I think, for ChatGPT to totally replace the student, because in many cases these are personal statements, and ChatGPT, as it tells you, is not a human being in that way, so they can't answer like a human being can, but they do use this natural processing language, and as a result it's very well written. And so I think that going forward, that colleges and universities are going to have to think, how more personal can our personal essay become, so that a chatbot here can't answer the questions that we're asking students. And I think that is, just yet another thing that's going to change college admissions in the years ahead.
Do you have a sense that it's going to have a kind of short-term impact over the next few months, or do you think it's going to take time to kind of trickle down into the admissions process?
I think it's going to take time to trickle down. I think that we have to wait until the tool itself improves. But if I were sitting on the other side of the desk reading applications, I would start to think, how can I figure out if this is students' authentic writing? Now, the problem is many of these essays weren't students' authentic writing even before this. Again, as I said earlier, it could have been that they hired a tutor or a coach to help them with their essay. Somebody could have actually written the essay for them and you would never know, or they get a lot of help in school. And so in some ways, this is yet just another tool that students are using in that essay. But it points to the fact that I think there are so many parts of the application that can be gamed by students, whether that is getting essay help, getting help with the test, the fact that there's grade inflation in high schools and things like that. So how can we get to the authentic self in terms of the students who are applying to our college? I think that every college is trying to figure that out, while having an application that also can operate at scale, because you don't want an application that is so difficult for students to fill out, but B, you eventually have to review all these applications and you have to do it fairly quickly. So you want something in that application that you could determine whether the student can do the work at this college, and it won't take too long to figure that out.
Yes, I hear exactly what you're saying. And when we're working with kids, we're really trying to explain to them that the college application process is actually an opportunity for them to reflect deeply about themselves, to try to answer in a way that's going to answer these questions in a way that's not only going to benefit their application, but that's also going to help them get to know themselves a little bit better, help them think deeply in a way that possibly they haven't in their high school writing so far. My view, at least, is that although there are many problems in the college application process, the way it is implemented now, it also has a lot of potential for good. The question is, how do we convey that message, especially to under-resourced communities?
And that's the key. I always thought that as I mentioned in my newsletter, this is in many ways, ChatGPT is in many ways like the calculator for the previous generations. It is a tool, and it could be used for good, and it could be used to help students make essays better, not necessarily write it for them, but make their essays better.
Yeah. So it's going to come down to how do we teach them to use these tools in a responsible way, rather than, I know some schools have already banned the use of ChatGPT entirely.
Yes, and I think that some other schools are going to try to figure out, are students using it for their college application.
Yeah, there was some mention about some kind of watermark, but I mean, ultimately, even with some kind of watermark, a student could copy an essay. I mean, it's hard to imagine a situation where there would be an actual kind of barrier.
Yes.
Okay, so coming to another kind of a very timely topic, what effect do you think the Supreme Court ruling might have on college admissions in the short and long term?
So I think that in the short term, we don't know, because I don't think we know kind of the scope of the ruling yet. That's going to be I think everyone's assuming the Supreme Court will strike down race conscious admissions given the makeup of the court, but we don't know what the ruling is actually going to say. And so what our college is going to be allowed to do. I think the one impact of it, will be that test optional will be here to stay, because test optional gives colleges maximum flexibility in crafting a class. And right now, when colleges get sued over their race conscious policies, the plaintiffs usually point to SAT scores for students in discovery, and they say, you accepted this student with a lower SAT score than this other student. Well, if you're not accepting SAT scores from everybody, that kind of throws that out the window.
Makes sense. Absolutely. And, just to kind of sidebar it with the test optional process, I have seen students who really just are not great test takers, but who are brilliant. And the fact that these tests are kind of becoming less and less, there are fewer and fewer colleges that require them, has opened up, possibilities for some of these really bright and promising kids. Don't you think?
I think so. And I think that I think especially with test optional, you're lowering the barrier to students who in the past were bright, they were talented, and they were actually a perfect fit for some of these universities. But because of their test score, they, in many cases, decided not even to apply. And now, at least with the lack of a test score being required by many of these universities, the admissions offices are at least seeing these students where in the past they didn't even see them.
Wonderful. Yeah, that is great. So kind of shifting to another part of your experience, given the time that you spent with admissions staff at several universities and colleges in preparation for your book, what do you think are the key takeaways for families planning for college?
So I think the top takeaway should be that the average acceptance rate of an American college or university today is 65%, meaning that most colleges accept most students. And I think that instead of getting caught up in the frenzy of college admissions, is to know that there are thousands of great colleges out there, hundreds even if you don't want to say there are thousands of good ones, and most of them accept most of the students who apply. They're a great fit for these students. And I think we just get so caught up in the anxiety of college. We kind of listen to this idea, well, it's so hard to get into college, when it really isn't. It's hard to get into a certain set of colleges and universities, but these other places are also places that you as a student could do very well in.
Yes, absolutely. The fact that research has shown, with the exception of the first generation college students, that it's what students do when they get to college that matters more for their long-term success than the rank of the college. In other words, have they engaged with the college community in an active way? Have they been mentored by professors? Those kinds of things. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that we know that that personal relationships count for a lot more in college than anything else, and 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 the experiences of students can be incredibly uneven. You could go to a college and never get to know a professor, even though it might be a top ranked college. Meanwhile, you could go to a lower ranked college and get to know professors in that first semester, really change your lives, or classmates, or coaches, or mentors. And to me, long after you've forgotten what you learned in Econ 101 or whatever class, pick a class, you remember those people who made that difference. And to me, you want to go to a campus that fosters those relationships, doesn't assign you mentors necessarily, but gives you opportunities to meet people in your residence halls, on your in your clubs, or on your athletic teams, in your classes. When I go to college campuses and I sit in on classes, one of the first things I notice is, did the professor rush into class, start teaching, and then rush off after class, right? How much time do they really spend with students right around class time? I walk around their offices and see if they're in them, and are they there during office hours, and are they open to meeting with students? Is there a sense on campus that people are talking to each other? Because again, the reason why we have decided to put 18 to 24-year-olds on a college campus together in a residential setting is for these personal relationships. It's something we know was lost during the pandemic that people didn't like. That's what you're trying to get out of a college experience. And the problem is, it's hard to know that when you take a tour for an hour, especially if you're only going there on a weekend when classes aren't in session. I really wish that we could spend a lot more time kicking the tires of colleges, because in many ways, this is a huge investment for families.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Do you have any ideas of how, given how busy the kids are and, working families and all of that, how could, we use some tools, we share videos, have students look at, videos of students talking about their experience in college, virtual information sessions, things like that. But do you have any other ideas of how we could move that needle a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that we could connect current students with future students, the better off we're going to be, in a very, very unfiltered way as well. So it could be personal videos, a day in the life videos to really get a sense of what school's like, or could we connect them so that they could talk to them, especially if it's going to be a student in your major, a student who came from a background like yours. What is it really like on campus? The more that we could do that, the better. Again, you go to a college campus and you go on a tour, they're going to show you all the bells and whistles. They're not necessarily going to show you what your day in, day out life, day in and day out life is going to be like.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So, how do you think high schools, counselors, and parents can make the admissions process more beneficial for students' long-term success?
I think that we should, first of all, we should talk more about what you want to do after high school, rather than just think of college as the end goal. It could be college 2 years after high school. It could be college 3 years after high school. There could be you could get a job that might pay for your college, right? There's a lot of options, I think, for students after high school that just isn't, going to college for everybody. So I think that's one of the things they could talk about. Second is talking about many of the issues that we've talked about here today, where they could lower the temperature, particularly on this idea that you have to go to a certain institution. Most students thrive. Most students don't go to highly selective places, for one thing, and second, they could thrive at a lot of institutions out there. And so, how can college counselors, particularly in high school, who are, I understand, are totally inundated with a lot of things. Many times they're sharing that duty with social and emotional issues, or they're dealing with a lot, and they don't have a lot of time, and they have a lot of students to oversee. And so as a result, they're struggling to help provide help to these students. But how can we provide these other resources? For example, we talked earlier about videos and chats with current students to help out the counselors. The more that they can make those connections, talk to students about previous graduates who've gone on to different types of colleges and have succeeded, the more they can give those examples, the better off these students are going to be.
Yeah, I love the idea of finding ways to support the counselors in the schools. that would be amazing, given the, what is it, 455 students to one counselor public school ratio these days. And, I've gotten to know them, some high school counselors over the years, and it's very hard for them to do their job well. They're wearing many hats. Sometimes they're teaching, academic courses as well as counseling. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you could change one thing about the college admissions process, what would it be? And basically, what do you think should change first? And how do you think the change could come about?
I think there should be one deadline. We should get rid of early decisions, and early decision, early action. I think that there should be just one deadline. It makes it easy for students to compare financial aid offers, makes it easy for them to compare admissions offers. And it really doesn't provide a leg up to wealthier students who don't have to worry about financial aid, who start the college process earlier and really benefit from things like early decision and early action. It is the one thing I think that we should do away with. I'm skeptical it'll ever happen because colleges and universities control that process and they love early admissions because it really helps them craft that class and lock in a class early. But never say never, right? I never thought we would see all these colleges go test optional. I never thought we'd see all these law schools drop out of the U.S. News and World Report rankings. All it does is take a few colleges, especially more elite places, to say, we're done. That's it. We don't think this is in the best interest of kids. Once they start doing it, others will follow. There's very much of a follow the leader in this industry, and that's all we need. I'm skeptical it will happen, but if you asked me 5 years ago, in 2023, are we going to be most colleges that test optional and many colleges now starting to think about moving out of the U.S. News and World Report rankings? I would have said never. So who knows?
Yeah, there's definitely hope. I love that idea. Okay, last question. What specific advice would you give to high school parents to preserve their kids' well-being throughout the college planning and application process?
Put it in perspective. I think it's really important. This is advice that comes from Rick Clark, who's Dean of Admission, Director of Admission at Georgia Tech, is don't let it overwhelm your life, particularly your senior year. You're going to be a senior only once in high school. Focus on it maybe once a week. During the height of the application season, you're probably going to have to spend obviously more time on it, but talk about it in a limited way. Don't make it the topic of dinner conversation every night or conversations with the family. It's a stressful time of year for students when they're applying. It's stressful in terms of parents, how they're going to pay for it. So clearly you have to have really good family conversations about it, but don't let it overwhelm your life, because when it does, when you talk about it constantly, that's when it starts to overtake what you're doing. And that's really the source of stress, in my opinion.
Yes, I hope that families that are listening to this are going to take that to heart. So thank you so much, Jeff. So glad you could be with us today. What you've said is really crucial for the future of our teens. And, among many other things, I feel like you're clearly helping shift the college admissions conversation toward greater sanity and sustainability. So thank you so much for your work.
It was great to be here, and thank you for having me.
And, I hope that your work continues to bring benefit to young people and empower all of us to build the college admissions process around students' long-term success and well-being with increased transparency so that all families can understand the system and how to navigate it. Please join us next time when we will talk to a new high school crafting an optimal college admissions experience for students. Till then, I wish you all joy in your learning and in your life.